Don't pack your fears. Have you heard of that term before? Particularly if you're planning your first Camino and maybe you've been doing some online research and you hear this term, don't pack your fears. That's what we're going to talk about this week, coming right up. Don't pack your fears, particularly if you're planning your first Camino. What does that mean? Have you heard of that term before? What it really means is that we need to, and this is just my perspective, of course, always on these videos. There are many different perspectives on the Camino. From my perspective, it is about letting go and leaving your day-to-day world behind and enjoying the freedom of the Camino, sort of unencumbered, unburdened. And what does that mean actually in a practical sense? Yeah, a lot of it can actually mean physically packing stuff just because you're worried that you're going to need it or that you can't do without it. And I think one of the very hard lessons to learn, it's probably very hard to learn for your first Camino, is how little you actually need on the Camino. I mean, basically, you need a change of clothes, maybe, a lightweight sleeping bag or something, and that's kind of it, almost. But we all do it, and we all pack this extra stuff through fear. So let me give you some examples. And some of you may have heard my story of the rice cooker. That did the rounds for a bit. So when I was planning my very first Camino in 2015, my wife Pat was due to come with me. She couldn't because of family issues. But she was really worried about the food in Spain. She'd never been to Spain. She comes from Southeast Asia. She lives on rice. And, doesn't really eat sort of a lot of potato and bread and stuff like that. And she was really worried about, I'm going to starve because I don't eat, that type of food. And we seriously, very, very seriously thought of taking a rice cooker. So I researched rice cookers. I found the smallest and lightest that I could. Have I got something here? I found one about this big, and it would cook enough rice for two people. Very cute little rice cooker. It weighed about 400, 500 grams, I think. And we were seriously going to take this thing. Until I was testing it at home and it blew up. I think that was a message from somebody. Don't bother with the rice cooker. So the rice cooker never made it. Other items have, though. The first Camino that Pat did walk with me in 2016, I ended up carrying a few bits for her, including a small hairdryer. Which she did use, actually. She has very, very long hair, and she was worried about, if I'm washing my hair and it's wet and we're walking in the cold, and all these sort of fears going through her head. And so we found an ultra light little hairdryer. In the end, she actually ended up cutting her hair a lot shorter to make it more manageable. And yeah, she used the hairdryer, but most of the time we're staying in private accommodation, and they half the time had them anyway. And she used it for drying out her socks in the morning and boots and whatever. So that one we did use. Did we need it? Oh, that's arguable. Another food-related one, we ended up taking one of those immersion heaters, one of those electric coils. And again, this was for food because, so this again was the first Camino that she actually came on. And she was worried about food, and she thought, in the mornings, at least if I can have a couple of boiled eggs or something like that. And so we brought a little cup and this coil for boiling eggs. I think we used it twice, so that's not going anymore. On my very first Camino, I wasn't quite sure what clothing was going to work for me, and I think I ended up taking about 5 shirts. This was actually one of them. And of course I didn't need them. And then we could go on about, medications and first aid kits and all kinds of things. I think I would have to admit, on every single Camino, 3 so far, I have probably carried stuff that I never used. Now, you could argue that some of it was good to have in case of emergency. Some of that stuff might have been, medical things, medications. Yeah, I mean, those were legitimate, I think. I carry sort of antihistamine and sort of things to stop diarrhea and stuff like, it's like 2 or 3 tablets of each. So I wouldn't beat myself up on taking those. But I have really got tough with my packing now, so that there's very, very little that I take that I wouldn't actually use. And then, of course, you have to remember that you are walking through, a very civilized country with stores which are probably better stocked than some of the ones that you've got near your home. Another thing that you really need, you can get, even if you have to jump in a taxi and go a short ride to a larger city or something. So I really would suggest that, when you're doing your physical packing, the great tip that I always learned was to lay everything out, on a table, on your bed, whatever, and go through every single item. Do I really need that? Do I really need that? And the other great tip is to try and make sure that everything that you pack has more than one purpose. So I think I've shown on other videos, I have a tiny little sort of 20-gram day pack that I use for shopping and for carrying stuff on the plane, for taking my washing to the laundrette, things like that. Try to take things that have more than one purpose and that you're definitely going to use. So it is about the physical packing. I think it's also about the sort of the mental state, and just going on Camino and accepting that there's very little that you need to take with you. Try to leave as much as you can, your day-to-day world behind, and not sort of worry too much about that. Try not to live in both worlds, I would say, which is really hard, because the Camino is a very different world, and you really want to relax, unburden, enjoy the journey, and that's really hard if you're still, connected in some way to your day-to-day life, work, whatever. So I think that's really what it means to me. Don't pack your fears. Go without expectation. Don't over-plan. Planning is fun. I do lots of planning, but when I get there, the plan goes out the window. Really, the planning was just getting my head around where I might go and how long it might take, and that's lots of fun. But don't try and stick to the plan. They very rarely work. And I suppose another term that you might come across to allay your fears a little bit is that the Camino provides. And this sounds very woolly and motherhood, doesn't it? The Camino provides. But it kind of does. And if you find that you need things that you didn't bring, or things crop up, you will find those things. You will find people to help out. And I think that's part of that unburdening as well, and letting go of the fear and just trusting that stuff will be okay. And things do go wrong on Camino. It could be little things, could be major things. But you'll learn to cope, and that the environment that you're in is very supportive as well. So, don't pack your fears. Don't stress. So spend time, going through your packing list, and so you have a degree of comfort there that you're at least not going to freeze to death, or, depending on what time of year you're walking, that you're taking appropriate stuff, but don't overburden yourself. I think that's really what it means to me. Don't pack your fears. Travel light, physically, mentally. So there we go, a bit of a ramble. What are your thoughts on packing your fears? What does it mean to you, particularly if you've walked a Camino before? Have you fallen into the trap of physically taking a lot of stuff, or emotionally carrying a lot of baggage with you? I'd be really interested to hear. But thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week. Bye for now.